Working on a chain gang. Working on a chain gang.
Either.
Working on a...
We were left to navigate this journey without her support. To this day, I am lost. When I was 14 years old, my father and I were at a park. It was one of the many times he and my stepmother were battling. He asked if I had any questions about my mother or her death. Honestly, I cannot remember if I asked any questions at all, but probably not, because I was terrified of my father. Just before his death in 2009, I tried to broach the subject again. He said, "I gave you your chance to ask questions that day in the park." I replied, "Yes, but I was 14 then. Now I am 48 years old and my questions are different." I also thought to myself, and I'm not fucking scared of you anymore. But he refused to talk. And now anyone who's ever touched my mother's life has died, including Aunt Shirley. The door is closed. All I have is all that I will ever get. Over the years, I've secured a few photos, a letter, and a pair of earrings, and that's it. I feel so much anger about how we children were denied awareness. But I have learned to live with it, sometimes surviving only by self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. That poor sharecropper's daughter, my mother, Ruth Ann Spillman, was in the end to receive the final injustice by being buried next to her father, Arthur Spillman. I've secured from my sister the legal court documents charging my mother's father with rape and having carnal knowledge of his 11-year-old daughter. In the transcripts, I read that he had also violated her other sisters, but they'd refused to testify against him. So Arthur Spillman had pleaded not guilty. My mother, according to the transcripts, showed her Jane Wayne grit by being the only one willing to testify against him. Upon learning of my mother's willingness to testify, Arthur Spillman changed his plea to guilty and was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in the Kansas State Penitentiary. Arthur Spillman served a mere 5 years and was released. My father told me he was welcomed home like a conquering war hero. Being buried next to him was the final indignity to her life. My mother had been married to another man at the age of 14 years old and then was divorced. She then married my father and bore 3 children. She was dead at 24 years of age and then buried next to the father who had raped her. There was no justice for her. My mother loved us. She never would have committed suicide. I still have lots of questions that will never have answers. This is all the information and memories I have of my mother at this time, except for one great piece of evidence that proves she lived and that she was a beautiful woman full of life. I'd heard rumors that my Aunt Betty had some 8mm film in which my mother appeared. I dogged this trail for over a year. I was again met with resistance, which included hearing one cousin who reportedly had the original footage had said with exasperation, "What the hell does he want that film for?" I guess they just didn't get it. I did not give up. Finally, a year later, I tracked it down with the help of a second cousin. She acquired the film and took it to a lab and had a master DVD produced and then burned copies for me. It has no sound, but my mother briefly appears 3 times. In one moment, she was caught walking down the stairs of my grandma and grandpa's house wearing a full skirt and a nice sweater and a beautiful smile. Walking over to my father, she faces him and reaches up to straighten the collar of his Levi jacket. I could see she was elegant and beautiful and that by her attention to him, she loved my dad. I've watched the clip many times. I've freeze-framed it and played it in slow motion over and over. I dedicate this effort and my life to the memory of my mother, and this book to give hope to others. Ruth Ann Spillman, 1940 to 1964. Author's commentary. After many formatting changes, I pray that I have found my perfect rhythm here, my groove, if you will. You have no idea how many changes transpired from first attempts of 9 years ago to this current work of art. And I confess that at times I have felt like a cross between old Carl from Sling Blade and Dr. Frankenstein, writing and rewriting, slicing and dicing. I have cut, dismembered, and reassembled this so many times that I feel like Dr. Frankenstein breathing life into death. And like old Sling Blade, I was sure at times I was indeed headed for the nervous hospital. With a little help from my friends and sound advice from my editor and closest confidant, Big John, I think I've finally arrived. So in these pages, we will scrape all the good, bad, and ugly little secrets from under the fingernails of our happy little family's fingers, delve deeper, digging down directly into the complexities of our lives. In my own voice, I will introduce you to an ensemble cast of characters, crew members, and Big Dipper stars that I called my family. I hope that by the end of the final book, as the credits start rolling and the curtain starts closing, you are still sitting in your red velvet chair, clapping, laughing, and crying all at the same time, feeling the punch in the stomach from a tragic, heart-wrenching fistful of feel-good feelings that keeps you clapping as you rise for a standing ovation for that lone fucking survivor of the most beautiful human train wreck you have ever witnessed. I turned 60 years old February 5th of this year, 2018, and I can still tear up when thinking or talking about my mother. Released from prison in the early 1980s and having successfully completed the program at the halfway house in Kansas City, Missouri, I requested and was granted a probation change to Lawrence, Kansas, where I entered into a 5-year court-ordered therapy, drug counseling, and probation supervision. The new therapist was pretty amazing, and I began to actually engage and work with him. I had learned through my experiences in prison that you should not tell anything to a shrink that could harm you, because somewhere down the line, anything you say can and will be used against you. But as our relationship developed, I began to trust and open up a bit. This was when we entered into hypnosis and childhood regression therapy. One day, my therapist announced that we were going on a surprise field trip. I soon found myself in Lawrence, Kansas at the public library, where he announced that we were there to do research into my mother's death. Feelings were a mixture of excitement and fear. Combing through the microfiche, we found a newspaper clipping about my mother's suicide. Next, we went to the courthouse where we obtained a copy of her death certificate. I had 2 dreams of my mother shortly after taking charge of these documents, and here for the first time I want to share them with you, the reader. The first dream began in a mall. I was standing on the carpeted upper-level deck of a mall with my hands resting on a chrome railing that ran the perimeter of the upper floor. Sandwiched between 2 chrome rails were glass panels. I stood overlooking the shoppers going about their Christmas shopping while hidden mall speakers pumped Christmas carols into the air like soft falling snowflakes. I could smell pine and spices. On the giant mall Christmas tree hung glittering red and gold ornaments adorned with frosted white snowflake designs. Gazing upon the sparkling gumdrop-shaped red, yellow, blue, and green Christmas lights, I got a feeling of something being draped around my shoulders. It was comforting, and I got a strong sense that it was a dark green plaid wool material. I watched the knitted stocking hats bobbing and weaving on the heads of children, their mittens swinging from sleeves of overstuffed coats, and I could faintly hear logs crackling and popping in a faraway fireplace. The smell of gingerbread started to fill the air of my dream, and these smells, images, sights, and sounds swirled and spiraled, wrapping around my heart. And in its totality, it was a mother's love. It was Grandma's cozy home where the bread baked in the oven and the stew simmered on the stove and everyone was safe at night. In that instant, my heart died 1,000 deaths for my mother. I was startled from the reverie when a cool hand was placed on mine. I turned to see a very pretty lady who looked lost to this time and place. She stood looking ever so proper with a button-down, crisp white blouse and candy cane red and white striped tie. She wore a full black skirt with a large Santa Claus-style patent leather belt wrapped around her waist. Her jet black hair was cut straight across shoulder length, with Cleopatra bangs to the top of her rather thick eyebrows, And she was perfectly made up like a poster-perfect model for the 1930s something new Maytag washing machine advertisement that promised women more time to be better wives and homemakers by freeing them from the time-consuming drudgery of hand-washing clothes. I looked at her, and her deep red lips parted, revealing perfect white teeth right below a perfect little pixie nose. Then she tilted her head slightly to one side and said, "You're Ruth Ann's son, aren't you?" I was hypnotized by her deep blue eyes as she seemed to look right through me. I answered, yes, I am. Do you know her? Do you know where she is?" The lady replied, "Yes, I do know her. She is the head of our art department, and she is downstairs waiting for you." She then took me by my hand and led me to an escalator that was forever moving downward. As we got to the point where we were about to step onto the escalator, I remember looking down, and I saw at the bottom of the escalator double doors with the words "Art Department" stenciled above them in red lettering. The feeling I had is beyond description. My heart was pounding and about to burst. My eyes flooded and my mouth opened to scream, "Mom!" But nothing came out. In that instant, it all vanished as I awoke. I awoke with a big lump in my throat and tears streaming down my cheeks, and I could hear my heart pounding as I opened and closed my eyes shut tight again. I desperately tried to return to the dream, to run as fast as my little legs could go, back to that magic escalator and my mother. But it was too late. Chapter 2. Maple Lane. I remember my father showing up to my grandma's house one day and taking me to a scary place way out in the country. This is where I met my replacement mother, Helen, and her two sons, Rodney and Donnie. Rodney was 1 year older and Donnie was 1 year younger than me. As a child, I was terrified of their entire family, the general living conditions and lifestyle of these people. There was Grandpa Charles Monkey Bryant, Grandma Millie, and Helen's brothers Chuck, Clifford, Wade, and sisters Dolores, Bertie, and Sue. They were very superstitious people. I remember going there was a dark, scary experience. Often they all sat around the table talking of spirits and ghosts. There was no indoor plumbing, and water had to be hauled from the well. When you were in need of a bathroom, you had to make a dash for the outhouse. There was always the smell of smoke from the wood stove on cold days, and the smell of hay and cow shit when you were outside. And to spark the terror of a young imagination such as mine, there was the story of the farmhand that had died in the barn when a bunch of hay bales fell on him. His name was Knip, and their talk of his ghost roaming the farm at night scared the shit out of me. I was a city boy, sheep amongst wolves, and my new cousins were rough and tumble scrappers. This especially scared the shit out of me. There was early morning coyote hunting and beaver trapping and animal skinning and gutting and butchering. To my young sensitive spirit, it was like waking up in a scene from a horror movie. I absolutely hated it. The fighting, wrestling, and the killing and eating of wild game. It was completely bizarre to me as a child. I was treated well enough, though, by Grandma Millie, and in general, I was accepted by the tribe. These aforementioned experiences were thrust upon a 6-year-old boy already traumatized by the sudden and recent loss of his mother. It was vivid, it was visceral, and stayed with me through my lifetime. These memories were only those of a small child in a foreign land. I respect and admire the Bryants. I cannot begin to tell you how surprised I was to find that the cousins I was closest to, like Dwayne, with whom I am closer to and know best, went on to become a U.S. Army veteran, certified diver, an accomplished shooter and hunter, a gourmet cook, a CDL holder, and pilot. Charles Hale went on to become a hard-riding Harley man and truck driver, known to me all my life as Charlie Brown. Unfortunately, he died in the early morning fog while riding his hog. R.I.P. Charlie Brown. Jeff, Charlie Brown's brother, went on to become an engineer for the railroad and then became a safety director of a major trucking company. He is also an accomplished archer and very active outdoor enthusiast. Natalie, Jeff and Charlie's sister, became the head of the Lawrence, Kansas HUD office. Their brother Dwight became a truck driver. David is a tree trimmer. Carla became a great mother and homemaker. Currently, I do not know what Charlie Brown's sister Kathy does. I look at all these memories and those experiences now through a much clearer lens. I've become reacquainted with all these cousins after more than 30 years due to the power of Facebook, and they've even treated me more like family than my own blood family. With all due respect, I say I am humbled to be called family by these fine people. Again, I do not remember my brother or sister ever going with me and my dad out to that farm. I only have a handful of memories about trips to the farm. Then, just like how I went from the little gray house in North Lawrence to my aunt and uncle's house, I suddenly found myself living in a house on Maple Lane with my new family. No memory of packing my stuff at Jim and Barbara's, and no memory of moving into a new house. I just woke up there. I then found myself second oldest and number 2. I was replaced by Jody, as we called him in the early days on Maple Lane. At first it was almost normal, but the dark, tragic comedy was about to begin. I remember the summers the most, because we spent most of the time out at Uncle Clifford's. Out of the entire Bryant clan, I liked Uncle Clifford the best because he always treated me just like the rest of the kids. Summer days were spent at the river bow fishing. And like in the scene from the movie Forrest Gump, where Bubba and Forrest are cleaning the floor with toothbrushes and Bubba is telling Forrest all the many ways to cook shrimp, I can say the same about carp. We ate boiled carp, baked carp, fried carp, carp on a stick, carp soup, carp kebabs, carp burgers, carp stew, grilled carp, cold carp salad, barbecue carp, pickled carp, and, well, you get the point, right? We ate a lot of carp. As a child, I personally hated living like this. After the tragic loss of my mother, I would soon find out that the real nightmare was still to come. In our first year together as one big happy family on Maple Lane, Jody took control of the family like a demon child right from the start. Our lives revolved around him and his moods and his relationship with his mother. Jody, or Rodney, as he will be referred to from here on, immediately began to bully my brother, my sister, and me, calling us names and beating me up on a regular basis. Rodney could do anything he wanted, and my father couldn't say shit about it without causing a fight with Helen. Rodney knew this, and he exploited this knowledge to the fullest. My father seemed to think that he had to prove to Helen that he loved her and her kids more than he loved his own children. It didn't happen daily, but it happened often enough where he would single us out for punishment and whip us with the big black belt to appease Helen. One time stands out in my memory. It was the time Rodney told us that if we wanted to join his club, we would have to put a dress on over our head and run around outside the house 3 times as an initiation. Hell, we were only 3rd, 4th graders at the time, just doing stupid kid things. My need to please him and to be included caused me to put the damned dress over my head, my face framed in the neck hole, and the rest of the dress bunched around my neck, resting on my shoulders. On my second time around the house, I saw my father pulling into the driveway. When I rounded the corner to begin my 3rd trip, it was all over. I stopped running and froze. He got out of the car and said, "What the fuck are you doing? Get your ass in that house right now!" He followed me inside and ripped the dress off my head. Then he pulled off his belt and told me to drop my pants. I was completely terrified and confused. He grabbed my wrist and started beating my ass in the back of my legs with the belt as I ran in circles trying to get away from the searing hot licks. When he was done beating me, my ass and legs had huge red welts on them. I was really scared, crying my eyes out from pain and from not understanding why my own father would do this to me just for running around the house with a dress on my head. The beating and verbal abuse was just the warm-up. Then he made me completely undress. Standing there, buck naked, he made me put the dress on. He then ordered me to walk outside to the mailbox and back while he shouted homosexual comments like, "Do you want to be a girl and wear dresses? Are you fucking queer?" I walked, sobbing with stuttering intakes of breath, hot tears running down my cheeks while my brothers and other kids who were playing outside watched me. I walked with my ass and legs exposed all the way to the street and back. This completely broke me.